Hi everybody, welcome to today's reoccurring webcast of Aqua Data Studio. We'll get started here in a moment. Let me just give a half a minute for folks to join. Okay, we can get started. Once again, welcome to today's presentation. If I maybe dive into the Aqua Data Studio main menu, you see the link to the community site. So www.aquafold.com is the community site for Aqua Data Studio. And then just to show you where we are today, here's the product demo. So this is a reoccurring webcast. We encourage you to rejoin as you dive into the product or future releases or share this with colleagues. The current version is 20.5. We'll be going to release 20.6 in the near future, either the end of this month or beginning of next month. And that's maybe one of the starting points with Aqua Data Studio. It's a product that's been on the market for nearly 20 years and has added databases and features and functionality along the way to help you as a database professional. So maybe let's go over a few introduction slides, and then there's lots of resources here that we'll talk about in terms of how to dive into the product, and then the live demonstration. Once again, the lines are on mute, and there's dialog boxes through GoToMeeting, so you can submit questions through the pop-out windows, and then we'll visit those towards the end of the presentation. So just general overview at this point, and then if we have specific questions, we can dive in towards the end and try to have those answered, or they'll be answered in a follow-up email at the end of the presentation. Okay, so maybe just a few slides to introduce the core areas of Aqua Data Studio. The current version added a few new database platforms in terms of some of the RDMS platforms, Amazon RDS platforms. Aqua has supported some of these traditional installations, but now as Amazon has hosted these, we've added Oracle SQL Server, MariaDB, MySQL, Postgres in the Amazon RDS environment. So just some new features here that we're always adding and always like to show is that we're staying current. Again, the database list has grown in terms of over 30, and then there's different configurations here as well. So just highlighting in red the Amazon platforms that were added recently. Prior to that was Snowflake, Interbase. We're adding Mongo, Atlas. We have MongoDB. So just staying current and adding platforms as users demand. When we dive into the connection window, you can see the variations with the mouse over. So just a screenshot here showing you where you can see different configurations of a certain platform. And then just in general, if you're brand new to Aqua Data Studio, it's a time saver productivity tool, right? So it improves your accuracy, reduces errors, easy to use, low footprint in terms of price point. So those are all good things. And then really for different users, different types of roles, right? So here on the product page, we position Aqua as a tool for developers, administrators, and now the analysts have really dove into the visual analytics portion. So you might have different users that use the product in different ways, right? And that's fine. Also installs on different environments. So Windows traditional client, but also has a Mac install, Linux install. So it's a Java tool that has flexibility in terms of where it installs. And then again, the range of different environments that you can connect to in terms of database support. Here's an example of types of users, right? It's just from our current list of job titles. Really anyone with the word data in their job name or team name would benefit from Aqua Data Studio. Some users might use Aqua more frequently than others. And then here is some terminology within the main menus that we'll talk about. So just maybe to tie this to the product itself and some of the main menus. When we talk about connecting, we use the term register a server. So we'll talk about that from the server main menu. Then exploring the navigation tree. You might be familiar with different trees and navigation styles. So you have flexibility in terms of the database IDE look and feel of Aqua, in terms of left or right or docked or pinned, right? All that flexibility that you'd expect in a mature tool. The query analyzer is where you can either type SQL or open up existing SQL that you might have, bring in SQL scripts, right? Parse through those, move quickly, format, right? Duplicate, execute one or multiple SQL, all the types of features you'd expect in a mature SQL editor. Query Builder, really the next few areas might be more data focused, so maybe less DBA, more analyst. The Query Builder is the drag and drop way to build SQL, right? You drag tables to a white space and then Aqua can write SQL code for you. Table Data Editor lets you insert, remove rows, edit data cells within an Excel-like grid. And then the visual analytics, this is growing quite a bit, right? And so here on the website, we position Aqua as a database IDE, right? And visual analytics, right? So it's a front end for database access, and then the drag and drop visual analytics for charts and graphs, and we'll look at some examples there. But that's obviously a popular area. You might know some other tools in this space like Tableau or Power BI. And so you have that all in one here in Aqua, which is nice and really a need for some users. Then there's different main menus or right-click menus that can invoke day-to-day tasks, right? Moving data in or out of the database, that's the tools menu, import, export. Schema sync, schema compare, file compare, those are drill downs in the tools menu or the right-click menus. So day-to-day productivity areas for file comparisons, diffs, even synchronizing of schemas, moving data, generating DDL, generating schema scripts or server scripts, right? Things you'd expect in a mature tool. Relationship diagramming, right? So ER Modeler is not enterprise-wide, but if you need to look at tables and entities in a diagram, you can do that pretty easily with Aqua. So there's other IDERA tools that might be more extensive or enterprise-wide, right? In terms of ER Studio, Warescape 3D. So those are other more robust modeling tools. But if you need some quick table diagramming, that's easy to do in Aqua. And then administration really is, throughout this list that I just mentioned, just connecting and looking at sessions or SQL, obviously database administration areas, creating databases. Here the management security drill down, right, into permissions and roles. These are all DBA areas. So just last on the list here, probably tied to the DBA tools menu and just wanting to introduce those areas, but these are DBA focused, right? So between the database administration areas, if you have those responsibilities, Aqua is very strong there, of course, as well. All right, so everything we show is usable and downloadable, right? So just from the website, you'll see download here, start here, so you can download and kick the tires on all these features that we're about to show. All right, so maybe let's back up a little bit. I'll maximize my screen, and then maybe just to start with a kind of a clean layout. When you first install Aqua, it will look somewhat like this, where you have the IDE type concept of dockable or pop-out windows on the left or right. And so here you can see my database navigation tree where I've connected to many different environments, and you have flexibility in terms of how you'd like to build this tree. And then you can move these pop-out windows around left or right, top or bottom, split, docked, right? Things you'd expect. On the right-hand side is my files navigation, right? So I can drill into my Aqua Data Studio files, my file system, maybe even my version control system, right? So you have easy ways of setting up map drives or paths. Or, if you work with a colleague, maybe you hand off Aqua Data Studio files to other users. And so, of course, you have that type of flexibility here within the product. And then you see visual icons signifying certain exclusive or native Aqua Data Studio files. And then the middle areas are workspace, right? And so here I have my query analyzers. Here I have some compare different windows that you might be using, and so those are invoked in different ways throughout the product. So we'll talk about that. And then you also, here, if I just ran a SQL statement just to give you a look and feel here. And then you also have, whoops, let me do that from here. You also have standalone or pop-out windows, right? And so we'll go through these green execution arrows, and they're expanded here under the query main menu. But you also have floating windows, right? So the visual analytics we mentioned, so that's a floating window. The ER Modeler is a floating window. The Query Builder is a floating window. So you have the flexibility here in terms of working with a docked or pinned window or a floating window. And that gives you the flexibility to use the tool how you'd like. And then these are all savable or shareable artifacts, right? So file, save as, you can save any of these or share these. And that ties into the file system navigation that I was mentioning on the right-hand side in my environment. Okay, so maybe just to back up a little bit, maybe I'll just open up a query analyzer so we're not distracted here. On the left-hand side, the very first icon, or server, register server, is how you get started using Aqua. So you can see an alphabetical list of databases. As you choose a different platform, you can see what area of information is needed here to be populated. So there's bundled JDBC drivers for all these different platforms, and then as you select a platform, you can see how information to be populated might vary, right? So here for DB2 or say SQL Server, I'll start to see maybe some Microsoft authentication, right? So here's SQL Server authentication, Windows single sign-on. Here for Oracle, you have some different choices, right? If I was just using the Oracle JDBC driver, then I see what's my Oracle Connect as, right? My connection type. So then you can explore these, like Snowflake would just have your host, database, warehouse, and credentials, right? So MongoDB, you'd see your host name, your database, right? So a lot of development's gone on in this window. Maybe if I right-click on an existing connection, go into server properties, you can see, you can just name it in a way that makes sense for you. Color coding, so you can see at the top there I have different tabs to keep track of where I'm at. And then these are very easy to manage or clone. I could just right-click, there's a clone. And so then you have the concept of folders, right? So I could create a folder or server group and then organize my connections that way, right? So here I have a folder where I have some of my DB2 connections, right? Here are my cloud servers. Right, here's my RDS environments, right? So you have flexibility in terms of how you like to set up your navigation tree and what's available or what might be up or down or available for you in different ways, and then those are in a history for you. Okay, so once you connect, then we always recommend exploring the tree. So maybe just to stick with a little bit of a agenda here. Oops, I'm going a little too fast. So here we just started with registering and connecting. Now we'll explore, right? So navigate the tree, right-click. You'll start to see a lot of functionality there. That might be in the main menus as well. So right now we'll introduce shortcut areas and then dive into working with SQL or working with data. So as I navigate my tree and in a MySQL environment, I see databases, management, security, right? So I could drill into my databases, see my databases, and then see my object types. So here in MySQL, I see my tables, constraints, procedures, stored code, functions, right? If I was drilling into Snowflake, then I see databases, security, management, right? So if I drill in here, I see my schema drill down, right? So maybe Snowflake, DB2, Oracle, you'll see schemas used, maybe not so much in Microsoft SQL Server. SQL Server, you see databases, drill into your databases, and you see your object types that way. So just exploring the tree starts to reveal different areas. And then if I was to right-click here, here are areas that are found perhaps only in the right-click menus, right? So there's a Create Object Editor for creating a database in SQL Server. So that would open up a tab here, and I could step through the tabs for creating a database. Maybe I was more at the table level, right? So here if I drill into my tables, right-click on a table, there's Create, there's Alter Drop Table. So this should be familiar in terms of a database IDE. So alter table would open up an object editor for that table, right? So you have this concept of tabs or floating windows, right? So here's a create database in SQL Server. Here's an alter table in SQL Server. Depending on where you are, you have that flexibility, right? So if I was in MySQL here, drilling into databases or tables here, right-click, same concept, right? There's create table in MySQL. Okay, so you have extensive object support, and then perhaps if you're more interested in scripting, the tools drill down, server script generator, schema script generator, these would be areas that you might be responsible for, right? So if I was to maybe just choose one of these windows just to populate. So if you wanted to generate object scripts for multiple objects at once, you don't have to drive from the tree. There's right-click or tools menu drill downs. Okay, so we'll dive into that shortly, but just letting you know, explore the tree, right-click on the tree, and then maybe just to keep moving along here, a core area within the tool after connecting and registering a server would be the query analyzer, right? So from the server main menu, you can really see your starting points using Aqua, right? So connecting, and then, let me open up a query analyzer. So when you drive from the main menu, you might be prompted, okay, what's the database you're talking about? Otherwise, if you right click, you save some shortcuts there. So here I just opened up a query analyzer against my MySQL database. If I right click on a SQL Server, there's query analyzer, that would open up a query analyzer on this MySQL SQL Server database. So then I could just start typing SQL. Perhaps I'm familiar enough with SQL and syntax where I could just start typing code, and then you see IntelliSense and pop-up windows the way you might expect, and then you could just execute SQL with the green run arrows, right? So you have different execution arrows that might be helpful, and they're all defined here under the query main menu, right? So there's just a single statement that's pretty straightforward. Let me maybe bring in multiple statements and then talk about executing against multiple tables or multiple SQL at the same time, right? So here's a different table. I'll just add that. And now, here if I expand the query main menu, parse would show me all the SQL in that editor. So there's a couple of statements. And then I could run either individual or multiple, right? So execute all would execute multiple statements, and then I have my result tabs in the bottom portion of the screen. Okay, so bit of a foundation there, or starting point is just connecting, and then the query analyzer is where you can open code and look at code in different ways, right? So maybe I had some more complex code. If I opened up a query analyzer, and then maybe I'll look at a explain plan just to maybe start to show some of the areas you can use a query analyzer in different ways, depending on your job role, right? So here, if I run a statement, I have my results set. Well, here's the execution plan. So, right, as a DBA, maybe I'm more interested in performance. I need to deep dive into the SQL. So that's an option there as well, right? So query, you can parse, you can execute, you can look at the execution plan, okay? All right, so maybe just to keep moving, or if I back up here to these data sets, of course, working with your data is a core feature in Aqua. And so you have traditional features like there's Launch Excel, right? Or I could just click on this icon and that would send this data set into an Excel spreadsheet, right? So that's, pretty straightforward. You might expect that very easily just with an icon or a single click. Maybe a little more traditional is just right click save results, and then you have more of a hand holding. This will show you where you could go to delimited or inserts or different file formats, and then that would step you through, right? So if I want to save this to a file location, I can easily do that. So export traditional, maybe export on the fly, and then visual analytics is an area we want to introduce here on the call today. So there's the icon for visual analytics. If I clicked on this icon above the data set, or when we introduce the visual analytics from the main menu, this would bring this data into the visual analytics window. And then that has certain areas and charting and graphing that is specific to the visual analytics window, right? So maybe just to give you an example, so if I clicked on this icon here, new visual analytics window, it would take these rows and columns of data and then separate those into my dimensions and measures. And then I can slice and dice and start building charts and graphs here within the visual analytics window, right? And so, maybe just to quickly show, right, if I wanted to just sort by a product name and number of records, for example, right? Or if I wanted to maybe sort by product name and units in stock, right? And then maybe I wanted to flip-flop that, right? So these are areas that are very easy to use in Aqua, and that's the visual analytics. Okay, so we'll go back to this in a little more detail. Other areas within the editor that you might be looking for, right? So here's a maybe more complex SQL statement. Here's a couple simple SQL statements. So I've executed all three of them. Now in the SQL history, right? So query SQL history. Here's a history of SQL I've executed, right? So there's some SQL Server code. There's some DB2 code I've executed, right? So this is something you might expect. Aqua just keeping track of SQL that you've executed in different environments. You have a history, you can go back to that. And then I have mine wrapping to an archive. So after 100 statements, mine writes to an archive, right? So these are different bells and whistles you might expect. Formatting, right? Cloning. So I could just right click here, format. So if I say format current statement, format script, you see different options, right? Line breaks, case, indentation, all that kind of good stuff is here, as you might expect. And then, if you're dealing with very large scripts, so here maybe let me just open up another query analyzer and just open up a script that has, many lines of code within it. Here maybe an exports, for example. Right here you have the scroll ahead, right? So this is kind of neat where I can just mouse over further in my editor and then just see statements on the fly, right? So lots of flexibility in the query analyzer that you might expect. Okay, and so you'll have different tabs open, right? You have multiple query analyzers. Just right-click query analyzer, or here I could right-click here and say clone window, and then you'll have different areas of workspace at the same time, right? So here you can see a lot of different things I'm doing at once, and that's what's great about Aqua. It really lets you get things done. Okay, so maybe just keeping an eye on the clock. If you're a little newer to writing SQL, that's fine. Here I was just typing SQL. If I navigate in the tree and then just start right-clicking on objects, Aqua can write code for you, right? So there I wrote a select statement on this products table. What if I just right-click on this table, right? I'll click within the editor, right-click, and then here script object to window. So to window just means the query analyzer. And then here you can see I could do qualified path, select stars. There's DDL, right? Create, alter, right? But if I just say generate a select with qualified path, there it writes the select for that table with the columns, and then I could execute just that individual statement, right? So execute an individual statement, have a single result set, or I could execute all three, and then I'd have three different tabs in the lower portion of my screen. Okay, so lots of flexibility there. Definitely right-click on objects. You have scripting features, right? So, if I'm a DBA, I'm scripting here, script object to new window. Here's the create DDL for this SQL Server database, right? Or I could do that for a different database. And then you have, different compare features, right? So here maybe I'll script this as a create script 2, and then here I'll just copy this to the clipboard, copy this to the clipboard, copy. So further on in the demonstration, we'll talk about some of the compare features, such as just comparing the clipboard. Right? So here's just copy compare. There's some more text compare, diffs, and then there's the wizard left and right hand side, schema compare, schema synchronize. Right? So lots of flexibility here that you might expect in a code editor like Aqua Data Studio has. And then maybe if you're newer to writing SQL, the query builder might be helpful, right? So here's a query builder I have against MySQL where I brought over some different MySQL tables. I can run that, bring back a result set, and then take action on my data, right? So the query builder is on the main menu, right? So the next few areas, query builder, visual analytics, ER modeler, these are all drivable from the main menu. Or of course, you could right click and then there's probably a hidden shortcut there as well. So right click here on a database query builder, and now here's a drag and drop interface for me to build SQL against certain tables, right? So here if I want to bring over, say, an orders table or a products table, if I have referential integrity between them, I'll see that. And then I could run that SQL, bring back my result set. Oh, let me make sure I'm going against some valid SQL here, or valid table data, right? And so depending on which direction you're going in, you can double click or select these, right? Maybe I want my category ID, category name, product ID, price. So Aqua can build this SQL in ways that make sense to you, and then you have this and the ability to execute this SQL, save this, share this. So file save as would save this as a .qbw file. You can recognize that in your navigation tree on the left where you see these extensions and then different visual icons for those. So that might be helpful, maybe a little more junior for some users, depending on your experience level. And then, you can save this or bring the SQL back in different ways, or maybe share this in OneNote or Google Docs for certain users. Okay. All right, and then of course you can go from there to say the visual analytics, right? So here's the icon above the data grid in the query builder. There's the visual analytics icon, right? And so here we had sent a data set to the visual analytics, right, earlier. And so here, if I just say data, connect to data, this would show other SQL you've executed, okay? So here, if I wanted to say maybe execute SQL in the query builder or execute SQL in the query analyzer, You can bring data into the visual analytics from that icon, right? So here's the icon to visual analytics. Or visual analytics new would then say, okay, what's the available data sets? So connect to data, it would show the SQL you've executed, right? So here's this order SQL. You see that order SQL here, right? So if I just say load data set, that would bring this data into the visual analytics window, right? Or here, if I say data, connect to data, right? I send some data to Excel, right? So maybe I'll just copy that to the clipboard, right? So right click, copy. I can cut and paste data into visual analytics. So data, paste data. Here it's just saying, okay, cut and paste from Excel. So there's a data set, right? So one's from the clipboard, one's from SQL Server. Here, maybe I'll maybe dive into, say, Excel, right? So if I maybe queried against an Excel data set, so that's an available data source in Aqua. If I just point to my database list, notice there's Excel. So I could point to my Excel data sets, and that's helpful for the analysts, right? Or a lot of us probably have data in Excel. So here's this visual analytics window where I could say data connect to Excel, right? So there's here's that Excel query, right? All right, so now let's maybe talk a little bit more about the visual analytics window. So on the left-hand side, you have your dimensions and measures, which you might expect in a BI type tool, where there's built-in intelligence of analyzing this data set. And so dimensions are your non-numerical values, right? Customer name, city, date. Measures are your numerical fields, right? Some kind of calculation, number of records, number of sales, profit, revenue. And so that's a built-in intelligence. You can change those around if you want to convert a dimension to a measure because of the way your company views that data set. That's fine. This is just a starting point or a way for you to analyze your data. And then you have the drag and drop, either X and Y axes, or depending on what type of chart you're building, right? You have pie charts, bar charts, and then all kinds of variations. So this has grown quite a bit over the past 10 years. So it's that floating window, but really a product within a product. You can see different templates we give you. And so if you're newer to visualization tools, that's fine, but there's a lot that's gone on here. So maybe, let's just dive into a few, right? So maybe if I wanted to look at, say, profit in a region, or profit by dates, or product name by sales, these are all ways you can use a tool like this, right? And then, of course, there's very intense visual analytics and in-depth analysis and aggregates and trend lines, right? We all see those on the news with charts and trends and graphs and slopes. So, we're all becoming more familiar with how to interpret data or tell a story with your data, right? So maybe just to look at some examples. So here I could, if I bring over, say, a revenue value, and then I wanted to, maybe build, say, a pie chart on that, right? So maybe I'll switch to pie chart, and then you have drag and drop property boxes, right? So maybe if I want to drop my territory into a pie slice and then label that, right? So here's profit in pie slices in different areas. So then I could double click into that. I mouse over, I see some values there, or I could narrow that down and then just say, all right, just view that subset of data, right? So these are easy things you can do with a visual analytics tool. So notice this developed a worksheet, so you can build multiple worksheets. So there's worksheet, new worksheet. When you combine worksheets, that creates a dashboard, right? So maybe let's build a couple of worksheets, right? So let me add another worksheet, and maybe we'll look at, let's say, just maybe sales revenue, right? Or maybe we want to change this to green for revenue, right? So that's easy. And maybe I'll sort this by my least profitable into most profitable, right? So very easy, drag and drop, as you might expect. So there's different tabs and worksheets. And so if I wanted to combine these into a dashboard, that's just dashboard, new dashboard, or on the bottom portion of the screen, you have the plus sign here as well, right? So if I just said new dashboard, notice the worksheets are available, then I could double click on those or drag and drop. And now I'm telling a story with my data, right? So here's territory sales, here's sales by product name, and then maybe I could share this with decision makers, right? And so export, you could export HTML or PDF, right? You could share this whole file as either a static Aqua Data Studio file or a packaged workbook. So you have the ability to include the data set or let users perhaps say refresh the data, right? And so, if you want to just share the queries and the visual analytics file, they can then refresh the data to get the most current data set. Okay, so lots of flexibility here and ways you might want to use the tool. So areas in documentation might be of interest. So just help online documentation. Everything in Aqua is documented. So visual analytics is appealing to you. That's great. Lots of details here on how to use that area and get better at that. And then again, this is a floating window. So here's a couple different visual analytics files that I'm working on at the same time, and that's fine. Okay, so another floating window, so similar, so Query Builder, Visual Analytics, ER Modeler, right? So the ER Modeler has maybe an additional field here for generate, and that's for reverse engineering, right? So maybe I'll just open up an existing ER model just to have that in the background. And then there's really two ways to dive in or get started using the ER Modeler portion. Again, ER Modeler new or generate, but there's also ways to find that in the right-click menu, of course, right? So here, if I was, again, working with a certain database platform, if I right-click there was the query analyzer, there's the query builder. Well, here's the ER diagram generator, right? So as you become familiar with Aqua, you'll find different shortcuts, right? So ER Modeler new would just open up a new ER Modeler window. So saying, all right, what database are you going to? Right? Choose your platform, and then you have the white space, right? So I could just say drop a table here or drop multiple tables and then start defining their structure here, right? Or maybe create a relationship between these two tables and then define that, right? So tools, scripting, generate, document, these are features you might expect if you're forward engineering, right, or starting from a new model. But maybe you're responsible for inheriting an environment, right, or seeing what's out there, or just documenting for other users. So then you might drive from the generate, right? So ER Modeler generate, or if I right-click, it's going to say, what database do you want to reverse engineer? And so then again, through the navigation tree, you can dive into this in different ways. So maybe I'll just stick with this SQL environment just for the sake of demonstration. And so here, let's see here. Okay, so maybe I'll just drive in here to this maybe SQL Server environment. Choose tables, views, related objects like indexes and constraints. So in this case, maybe I'll just point to my tables and views. You have that flexibility. Here's about a dozen or so tables, pretty quick for the sake of the demonstration. This will hit the data dictionary or the catalog, and then diagram that for you. So maybe you've inherited an environment that you're newer to, or maybe you're a DBA and you get phone calls about what does the data model look like. You could just easily reverse engineer this type of way, and maybe post a report for them so they can stop calling you. You can share this, as a diagram, right? So you could save this file as just a diagram file, and then of course you have modeling features, right? Where I could drill in, look at the SQL for this. Right, I could forward engineer from here and drop a table in here and make changes to this model. Then you have scripting, right? So generate script if I just want to generate the DDL for all of these objects, and perhaps push that out to another environment. Here within just a couple of clicks, hundreds of lines of DDL and code generation, right? So these are really strong points in Aqua, as a lot of users can see right away. And then a compare features are great, right? So tools, compare with model, compare with database. So this would allow me to compare to, say, a previous model, right? And so maybe I'll point to some other models of generated in the past, or depending on what environment, right? You can compare different platforms and then see, okay, you know what? These two are identical. These two are in both models, but there's something different. And then this, this is only on the source. This is only on the target. This is the same. So those type of handoffs are great, right? Where you have very easy to use features in Aqua, and then different features that have been there and are must-haves for a tool like this. And so there I was comparing models. Here was, say, a side-by-side file compare, so I could just easily do side-by-side compares and diffs where you see code different between two environments. Here was a memory compare, right? So compare tools, copy compare. So it'll just say, okay, what's in the clipboard there, and then I can do side-by-side compare and show what's different that way. So lots of compare features. And then the more robust compare wizards, schema compare, schema synchronize. So this would ask you for a source and target, right? So you can choose, left and right-hand side in terms of where you're comparing against. And then, that would be a familiar, interface that you might expect, right? So depending on where you are or what you're connecting to, right, you have the side-by-side comparisons of these object types, right? Then for DBAs that have day-to-day administration responsibilities, for about 15 of the different platforms, there's the DBA core administration, right? So instance management, storage, session, and security, right? So you can see those in different ways here in MySQL: instance manager, storage, session, security manager. Here's SQL Server, instance, storage, session, security. And so these are must-haves for a DBA, right? So here for SQL Server DBA, I could right-click on a connection or drive from the main menu. So maybe I'll just expand from the right-click, maybe some shortcut tips here, right? So DBA tools, there's Session Manager. So here's how I could see active sessions in, say, a SQL Server environment. If I was looking at, say, Amazon Redshift, then I have the Instance Manager. So this would show me active SQL in my Amazon Redshift environment, right? So maybe different look and feel depending on what you're responsible for, but diving into last SQL or terminating a session obviously are areas that you'd like to have in terms of resolving a bottleneck, for example, right? But then, storage might vary, right? So here in MySQL, I could right-click DBA tools. There's Storage Manager in MySQL, right? So I see databases, engines, objects, open tables. Where, in SQL Server, that might be a little bit different, right? So here's Storage Manager in SQL Server, where I'll see, my databases, data files. In Oracle, you'll see table spaces, right? In DB2, you'll see table spaces. So depending on the platform, you can see variations there in terms of the DBA drill downs. Okay, so this is a general overview. We're trying to help with the momentum that's going on now with people working remotely and, taking advantage of these webcasts and really the momentum behind a larger company like IDERA, right? So AquaFold came aboard IDERA about 3 years ago, and then Aqua Data Studio is the product we're talking about today. So we have a lot of branding with the AquaFold website, so that still exists. But then you have lots of resources here. If I right-click on the resource or dive into the resources tab, here's documentation or ways of justifying your investment in Aqua Data Studio. You can narrow down to just videos or webcasts, right? So lots of different ways here to dive in and get better at Aqua, right? So you can download for free, and then there's either a trial period or someone will contact you to make sure you have enough time to kick the tires. And we look forward to partnering with you. So thanks for joining. Please download and dive into the product, and then we really think you'll see a lot of value and time saving just by getting your hands on the product. Okay, thank you. Have a great day. Take care.